at the Wisconsin Auto Museum. One thing I really love when you come to a quality automobile museum, they always have a display of the racing industry, the automobiles that made the automobile famous. And what I mean by that is, without these automobiles in the racing industry, you wouldn't have half of the technology you have in your car today, because this is the test bed for fuel injection, suspensions, rack and pinion, everything that the computer industry and all of that. You know, I was at the racetrack just recently with the Fuel Funny cars, and I remember as a kid going to the racetracks, and boy, you were the head honcho at a racetrack if you could get your car to do 12 seconds in the quarter mile. Now I'm watching cars in the quarter mile, well, really 1,000 feet now, and they're doing it in 3.5 seconds, 2.8 seconds, 300 miles an hour. You can't turn your head fast enough. But I'll tell you something, growing up and seeing guys actually do this with automobiles where they took a stock car and built it into something high performance, with them it was all engineering in their head and trial and error. Today, computer industry has made it very easy for them to achieve what they're doing now. But this industry has just been phenomenal. I know, I've been to the track many a time, and it's packed with people. And I'm glad to see that happening in the automobile industry.
One of the more recent exhibits that we put together the last few years is this gas station office, which doesn't date to a specific time period, but more 20s through the 30s and 40s. And my grandfather actually had a gas station and hardware store for many years, so some of the artifacts that we've got here were his. We were fortunate enough to have original windshield wipers, some in the package and some not in the package. And we've also got new old stock of the Chevrolet clock here. My grandfather had a 1937 Chevrolet, and he had evidently purchased that to put in his car, and it never happened. A few of the other items over on the shelves include different types of cans of oil, and the oil cans were actually all metal at this time. Later on, a lot of people remember the paper quarts, where there was still a metal top, but the main body of the can was paper. But a lot of those still have oil in, Prestone can. The water pump grease is kind of neat. We had a whole case of that my grandfather held on to, and we've actually used some of it on our 1920s vehicles here at the museum. '66 Oldsmobile Toronado. This was the first year of front-wheel drive for Oldsmobile. In fact, Eldorado and Toronado, two cars made by General Motors, were front-wheel drive in 1966. It began that craze. But this was like the car of the year, I believe. I know in Oldsmobile's line, but I think in the General Motors line, this was the car of the year in 1966. This was so popular, and I'll tell you one of the reasons why. I was growing up in this era. The manufacturers used to give cars like this away to famous people. I know Sinatra was driving one, and I remember Dean Martin was driving one also. You know, another interesting part of Oldsmobile that's not here anymore,
a wonderful history in the General Motors line. But the one story that really comes to mind with Oldsmobile, everybody talks about Henry Ford's production line. He was the first one to have a production line where the car rolled down the line and they put parts on it. Well, that's not true. Rancid Olds was the first one in America to have a production line. But Henry Ford was the one that perfected it. When he got his assembly line running properly, he actually was able to drop the price of automobiles by $300 back in the early 1900s. That was amazing. But Oldsmobile was the first car in the GM line, and it was a spectacular car. This is a beautiful 1966 Oldsmobile Toronado. '37 Studebaker. Now this caught my eye. You know, there's some cars in this museum that are just beautiful. I call them eye candy in the automobile industry. This one is one of them. It's just, I know it's been restored. I know it's been repainted. It's just a beautiful paint job. The chrome is in excellent condition. I think some of it is original. But I want to mention something about museums and that. Studebaker Museum I've been out to in South Bend, Indiana. And just like this place, it's done extremely well. I've been asked many a time, which is my favorite? And I always say to people, yes. And what I mean by that is they're all my favorites. They all have something beautiful and elegant. I've been out to that Studebaker Museum. In fact, I shot some footage there a number of years ago. We're going to work on editing that. But this one here, this 1937 Studebaker, is just gorgeous.
This is a 1953 Wild Goose teardrop camper. Teardrop campers first came about in the 1930s, but they were really taking off post-World War II. And you don't really see it so much on this one. It's got that nice woody design, but it is aluminum. And the thing that was nice about the teardrop campers is that they were fairly light. It was easy for them to be pulled by just about any vehicle. You didn't have to have a lot of horsepower to pull one of these. This is a home-built camper. The plans were initially published in Popular Mechanics in April of 1953. And the Wild Goose was a lot nicer than some of the other campers that were out there. This one, you had a connecting doorway from the sleeping quarters into the kitchen area, where with the other campers, you had to physically leave the sleeping quarters and go out and you accessed your kitchen area just from the rear. This one too, you can be standing upright in this kitchen area. You could be completely screened in away from the bugs, or if the weather were very nasty and rainy, you could be completely canvassed in. So complete with an ice box, with a gas Coleman stove, all the comforts of home with you. The sleeping quarters right now are set up for one person because the person who donated this to the museum was by himself. But I've seen historic photos where they would have a futon-style couch, so you could have a couch during the day. You folded it down and you essentially had the space of a standard double bed. So easy sleeping for two people. And we've got it paired with the Ford Woody wagon, and the two of them go very well together. You see a lot of the Woodies, especially in that late 40s, early 50s time period as well.
The beginning of the pony car industry, the long front end, the short trunk, this was the car. This is in 1965, but it was the first full year of production of the Mustang. Mustang started in 1964 and a half. As soon as they made them, they were brought to dealerships, they weren't going to be sold, and they started selling them immediately. You know what? For the rest of the story about Mustang, you're going to have to go to RichieZ.com. That's RICHIEZIE.com. And we have a radio version of the history of Mustang on there. And we go in detail from 1961, I believe it is, when the whole idea came about, through 2015. Do you know 9.5 million Mustangs were produced? The only pony car that survived everything. I think it's one of the largest production cars in the Ford Motor Company line. (1950) Studebaker. This was a very interesting automobile. It had the bullet front end on it. That center of the hood, the grille, was actually shaped as a bullet. You know, I want to tell you a little bit of history about Studebaker, because it really was a spectacular car company, way ahead of its time. You know, when GM and Ford and Chrysler were building the big, huge gas guzzlers back in the 40s and really the 50s, Studebaker came out with automobiles that were streamlined, aerodynamic, with little 6-cylinder engines and one-barrel carburetors that would get 30-plus miles to the gallon. Way ahead of their time. If you go back and look at some of the Studebakers from 1953, 54, their cars were like sports cars, really elegant, with windows that rolled up and down and door handles on their cars. And I want to mention that because the first Corvettes that came out didn't have a roll-up glass or even a door handle on the outside of the automobile. So Studebaker was way ahead of its time, and it still to this day looks elegant and sporty. Road Art Collection by Mecum Auction. You know, one thing I want to mention before we even get into this, you're seeing some beautiful signs and gas pumps and globes and on. But if you really are a car guy and you love automobiles, you probably have seen the Mecum Auctions on television, but they have a fantastic website at mecum.com. Take a look over there. This show is originated from Wisconsin, from the Wisconsin Auto Museum. But while in Wisconsin, we had the opportunity to stop at Mecum's place and they're having a auction this weekend of all the memorabilia. So you guys are really getting a sneak peek of what they're going to be auctioning off. Let me talk a little bit about the gas signs, the pumps, the globes, and any kind of oil cans and oil pumps and on and on and on. If you ever see any of that stuff, definitely pick it up. It's become hotter than the automobiles at the auctions from the past because people can relive their childhood. They can relive that memory from the past. And how many times have you been in a bar or a restaurant, you see the propeller from an airplane or the gas pump or that old-fashioned Texaco or Haviland sign? Well, this is what Mecum does, and they do it very well. The reason I want you to go to his website is if you have the opportunity to ever go to one of the auctions. We were at the major auction at the Renaissance Center in Schaumburg a couple of weeks ago. That was unbelievable. Over 1,000 cars were auctioned off. But this memorabilia show is going to bring a lot of money. But if you see any of this stuff at a flea market, you know, this picker show is real popular. If you can get it at the right price, buy it and relive your childhood, or put it on eBay or put it with Mecum and try to sell it there. 1989 Saab 900. This is the car that actually has 1 million miles on it. It's went through, I don't want to say went through hell, but it really went through a lot. 1 million miles on an automobile. This is another sad story in the automobile industry because a number of years ago, they didn't sell enough Saabs to keep the company open. And this is a very well manufactured automobile. Safety-wise, it was rated always in the top 3. Kind of sad to see it go, but a lot of cars left in the last 5 to 7 years. But this was an interesting car. '49 Kaiser. Kaiser Frazer was a company that built some really elegant, beautiful automobile back in that era. This is one of the cars, you know, I just want to mention something. During World War II and that, the cutback on making real sharp cars and adding chrome and, you know, they even quit production on some of the cars. You couldn't get cars with bumpers and stuff like that. So this was a car after World War II, and I would say Kaiser Frazer went out full boat on this automobile. Now this is known as a pillarless four-door hardtop. Now all of them back before this era had a pillar in between the front and back door glasses. Well, this one's got that glass there. I believe that's removable, but it's known as the pillarless hardtop. Gorgeous car, and this is the original color. You know, something was brought up to me with one of the other cars we did here, that the color had metallic in it back then. That was a car we did in the 30s. Well, this is 49, and this metallic color was on this automobile back then. 1969 Roadrunner. Now, people see in the auctions that Mopars, the muscle cars of the 60s especially, the Mopars in the early 70s, are bringing huge amounts of money. Well, one of the reasons is everybody always talks about the big 3 automakers, and Ford and GM had a huge part of the market. I heard a number of years ago that, you know, Chrysler had 10 to 12% of the market. Well, I was corrected by a gentleman called Mr. Norman Chicago. He called into my radio show, and he was the biggest muscle car guy back in that era, and he told me that Chrysler had about 1% of the market. So the reason these things are so valuable now is because of supply and demand. But this one's got a wonderful story. The gentleman that bought this is still in the family that it was purchased in back in 1969. The gentleman that bought this was in his 50s, always was meat and potatoes kind of American guy, drove station wagons because he had a big family. And one day he pulls up at home with this 1969 Roadrunner. And the story here around the museum is the son owns it now. It's on loan here, but Dad never looked back and never regretted it. Loved every minute of driving this gorgeous muscle car. 1951 Ford. You know, these cars here were customized a lot. This one is a very interesting custom because normally a guy would take a car like this and chop the top. You never see one with the original top in there. Well, this one has the original basic body style, but he did all the other bells and whistles, as we call it in the industry, putting the different grille in, the chrome wheels with the Baby Moon hubcaps, and even the Laker pipes on the side of the vehicle and the spotlights on it. Very interesting looking 1951 Ford Custom. 1966 Fleetwood 75. Now this automobile, it's a factory-made luxury extended vehicle. Now the difference between this and a limousine, the only difference is that it would have a window between the driver's compartment, the front compartment, and the back. This one does not have the window dividing those two areas in the automobile. But one of the reasons I wanted to stop with this automobile, this was the first year of this body style for Cadillac. And this was just a gorgeous automobile, but this was when they really made automobiles, because it's a limousine that was made in the factory. Today, you don't have anything that even comes close to something like this being manufactured by the manufacturers. You buy a car today, and to make them into a car that's a little longer, a limousine-style automobile, you would actually have to take it somewhere, and they cut them in half, and then they actually put a piece in the center between the front half and the back half of the car. So this was really, I'm a sucker for these old, they called them lead sleds, there was a lot of names for these automobiles, but I really am a sucker. I think these are gorgeous automobiles back in when I was growing up. I'm the host of the Wild World of Classics, but you know, we renamed the show Automotive Heaven. And I just spent a whole day at the Wisconsin Auto Museum, the largest auto museum in Wisconsin, and it was truly automotive heaven. This place is put together very well. If you don't come out here, you're cheating yourself. There's something for everyone at this museum, and you'll enjoy it. You could bring the little kids with the trains and everything else that we have here. You could bring mom, you could bring your wife, your girlfriend. There's something here for everyone. Supporting places like this keeps them in existence, and we need to do that. So if you support the Wisconsin Auto Museum, I'd appreciate that too. Also, I'd like to give a big thank you to Dawn, the executive director of this museum. Not only did she help us come in here and do what we did, but she was super knowledgeable, and she did a great job with doing some of these beautiful displays here. If you'd like to see more shows like this, we're available to come and shoot other museums or unique things in the automotive industry. If you have a product or service, sponsor one of these shows or become a sponsor, a regular sponsor on our show. You can always contact me at richiez.com. That's www.richiez, Z like in zebra, IE.com, richiez.com. Or you can call me direct at 312-841-2560. Help keep this gorgeous type of programming together. We don't have any drama. We just tell the history of the automobile industry.